Welcome and thank you for joining us today for Driving Observability through Machine Learning and Predictive Analytics. My name is Raleigh Gould and I'll be the moderator for today's event. Our featured speaker is Will Schoeppner, Research Director at Enterprise Management Associates. Will is an accomplished information technology and business operations leader with more than 25 years of experience developing, managing, and leading business operations, integrated technology, and vendor management. Prior to joining EMA, he led strategy and performance for the Governor's Office of Information Technology as a Deputy Chief Strategy Officer. And before I hand things over to Will, I wanted today's audience to know that we will be concluding today's event by taking your questions. Feel free to log them anytime by using the Q&A functionality. Also, today's event is being recorded and you will receive a follow-up email from EMA with resources from today's event. So I hope you'll check that email out. And now I'd like to go ahead and turn things over to our featured speaker, Will Schoeppner. Will?
Thank you, Holly, and thank you everyone for joining this webinar. I'm excited to be here today. I also want to say thank you to Raleigh for all her support and work in organizing this, and that warm welcome. Next, I'd like to thank Elastic, who is our sponsor for today's research. I have had just an amazing time working with the team from Elastic on this research and the findings, and really some of the things that we will be discussing here today. So just quickly, agenda. We're going to cover overall maturity of a data-driven organization. That kind of sets really up that foundation of why observability is so important in an organization. And then we'll look at the foundations of data management, business successes of adopting observability with ML and AI, as well as the challenges in a complex landscape that we're seeing today. And then next, trends in predictive analytics and observability, as well as finding the right solution, and then we'll kind of wrap everything up. But first, I want to jump into really the study itself, just the high level about the study and what we collected on. So you can see there was 155 respondents. The company size was 1,000 employees or greater, and the locations were within the US, France, Germany, and UK. You can see pretty even breakdown between the US and European countries. You can also see the breakdown for company size here. And next, pretty even breakdown across industry as well. So jump right in. So one thing that I will say that was really interesting about the study is really defining observability. Monitoring of our systems have been around for ages, and so has observability. But one thing that working with the Elastic team that really we were seeing that there isn't a really defined definition for observability across the board. We're seeing that it could be limited within the systems, it could be using machine learning and AI. So we really wanted to focus on what that looked like and what a definition of observability truly meant. So I don't read too many things from a piece of paper because I think that would make a really, really boring webinar. But the definition that we came up with, I do want to kind of read just to make sure that I have this really clear for the audience. And what we were talking about with observability, that it should really deliver crucial visibility into the health and performance of each layer of the environment, encompassing all data from any source. So just not one single area. It needs to really have that overall look. And then also enabling predictive solutions and remediation of critical events prior to the impact of customer performance. And I think that piece goes without saying. And then additionally, unified observability brings infrastructure monitoring, security logs, applications, performance monitoring, and SaaS monitoring into a single platform for a complete end-to-end visibility of cross-functional teams, driving streamlined collaboration and faster resolution of issues. And the reason why that part was so critical, because you'll see within the data and also some previous research that I'll talk about, is even though we have integration teams like DevSecOps, teams are still using disparate tools. And we're still seeing that silos still plague technology groups. And this is still an issue across the board that many CIOs face. So jumping in, and like I said, we really wanted to look at what makes up a data-driven enterprise to understand first how important in our organizations really using data to drive business decisions at all layers. So not only just within business outcomes, but actually starting with their technology teams and their infrastructure layers. So you can see by this slide here that it was, I believe, 73% of organizations that have been data-driven for at least 3 years or more. And then on top of that, when we look at it, by countries or regions, so the US has been a little bit more advanced in being data-driven than the European countries. So again, if we look at really at 3 years or more, 81% of US companies have been data-driven, where only 66% of European companies have been data-driven for 3 years or more. But there's an interesting finding that we saw actually in a previous study that the European countries are actually getting far more benefit in realizing true outcomes from being data-driven more than the US countries. So even though they were lagging behind to start this process, they're seeing a greater benefit. And then we ask, how is your organization's culture? Because really, when we talk about any change, as we all know, it's not just about technology or the tools, it's really about the people and people in the process. So you can see here, which I was really pleased to see, 81% of the respondents felt that their organization's culture is extremely set in using data analytics to drive business decisions. And then we asked, how important do you feel it is to have analytics in your business decisions? Not surprising, along with the culture and what we also saw with data-driven, 90% felt that it was extremely important or very important. And then when we ask really about how would you describe the availability of operational and business data analytics? Because one thing to be data-driven as far as an organization is one thing to be strong as a culture, but then really around your operational and business data analytics is really what's going to be important. And you can see, again, that we're very pleased to see, at least within the respondents of this study, that 80% were either above or average or excellent in driving business decisions through data analytics. However, when we looked at what is your maturity in analytics and machine learning observability, then we're starting to see a difference. And here we're starting to see that there are rooms for improvement within the companies that we surveyed. So only 5% were saying that they're superior in their maturity for ML and observability, and only 49% saying advanced. So there's definitely room for improvement in this area. And then we asked then, how effective are you at correlating, being able to correlate your use of machine learning and analytics to specific business outcomes? So really, are you being able to be proactive and predictive to drive those business outcomes? And only 21% said that they were excellent in this. Next, I want to jump into the next area within this research, and that's around the business successes of adopting ML and AI, of observability. So we asked the participants to rank the following machine learning and data analytics use cases from what's most important to your organization to least important. And the top 3 on this were workflow automation, predictive analytics, and customer sentiment analysis. And I will say, in just about every research that I do around data analytics overall, whether it's about observability, whether it's APM, whether it's just overall decision-driven analytics for business decisions, we can see that those really are those top 3. they consistently come out on really when it comes to workflow automation and predictive analytics, and really that customer experience are always what really comes out in these type of questions. And that's not surprising. So when we look and talk to CIOs, really one of the things that we're going to see here a little bit in the research, resources is always top of mind. And really, how are those CIOs going to try to do more faster in this complex hybrid multi-cloud environment, and all the changes that we're seeing across the world in the last couple of years with digital transformation plans being just heightened and increased, that technology teams are expected to do more faster, deliver to customer expectations even faster. So really, that key for CIOs to get ahead of that is through automation of processes, really starting at that infrastructure layer. And then we asked from the choices, what was the greatest benefit of observability in your organization, of your current solutions? And then you can see here being able to prioritize and resolve issues faster, as well as being able to proactively detect issues. Obviously, that's going to directly impact that customer satisfaction. But then tied were team collaboration and that customer experience. And again, really not any surprises that these were the top 4 on the list. And then we asked really, so describe your organization's maturity. And you can see I try to ask really about that maturity and benefits across the board within this study. And you can see for maturity on using analytics and machine learning observability. So 71% of the respondents have said that they've been using it for the last 3 years or more, which to me, that was a little surprising to see. That number was higher than I expected. And then we asked really what are the greatest challenges of unifying observability? Because if you remember back from that definition, really, so we strive for observability, but truly the goal is to have unified observability across all of your systems. And you can see here the number one issue that honestly was expected in this research was the complexity of a hybrid multi-cloud environment. With everyone moving to the cloud, we can see that things are getting a lot more challenging, a lot more complicated. And we're also seeing that not everything is moving to the cloud. And that's why we stress that hybrid model, because really that's what we're seeing across the board. Unless you're a new startup, really enterprise organizations, and that's also why the study looked at companies that were 1,000 employees or more, because if you look at that element, really most companies are going to be in a hybrid multi-cloud environment today. And then next within this, the ability to digest, and in this case, saying source from telemetry data in real time. And I would say even just the ability to digest all data in real time. And then the third top choice, which was really kind of key, is that teams and tools are siloed. And you can see that 21% was saying that. We'll talk about that one a little bit more too. And then, so this is that age-old question of my teams are able to identify those unknowns. Because I don't know how many times I've talked to CIOs, CISOs, excuse me, and asked about the unknown. What do you not know? Because that's what keeps up, especially the CISOs and CIOs up at night. So you can see here that only 18% strongly agree that their teams are able to resolve those issues. But the scary thing here is if we look at the undecided, the disagree, and strongly disagree, that's 27% of the respondents saying that their teams are unable to identify the unknowns in their organization. My team is effective at proactively detecting abnormal behavior, and you can see here 25% agreed and 54% agree, but yet there's still a lot of room for improvement here. And so this kind of, this question was really core of looking at why machine learning and observability is so important. So when it comes to issue incident response and resolution, what best describes your technology teams? And you can see here that only 39% are proactive in resolving most issues. What's kind of scary here is that 24% when we look at both are most reactive or overwhelmed. So a quarter of the respondents are saying that their teams have a lot of challenges here. And then my technology team experiences fatigue from alerts, as we all know that this is a huge issue that's going on right now, and it always has been. When I was at the state of Colorado, so just within our security department, we had millions of alerts every day. So how can we really drive to make sure that our teams are not inundated with alerts, that they're not fatigued, and that they're really having that focus on the alerts that they need to, and having auto remediation in place through AI and ML to really take that pressure off of our technology teams. So you can see here only 48% of the respondents saying that their teams, well, actually 48% are saying that their teams are experiencing fatigue and alerts. But the next slide, which is really interesting when we asked this question, and we broke it down by the C-level and then director and staff, you can see that only 40% of the C-level feel that their teams experience fatigue from alerts, but nearly 60% when we ask the director, the manager, and the staff are saying that they experience fatigue from alerts. So there's a little disconnect there within our organizations, our companies, from really that leadership standpoint. So there's definitely education that needs to happen at all levels within the organization. And for those that have worked in those teams, including myself, we have felt that and seen this happen. So then we wanted to look more future looking and asked, out of the next capabilities that we're seeing within observability, which ones are you looking at implementing now or within the next 6 months? And if you remember back at really with the priorities, it mirrors that question. So at least we were happy to see that there was a lot of consistency in the reporting here. So we're seeing that within the next 6 months, or currently to the next 6 months, that companies are looking at implementing predictive analytics to really drive that customer experience, take the pressure off the teams, that workflow automation to drive resource issues and costs, and then really that focus on the customer satisfaction. So then how do you find the right solution? So we talked about really the use cases and the benefits across observability and using AI and machine learning, but what is that key thing that CIOs and organizations are looking for in the correct observability solution? So we ask, what best describes your current observability solution? And then this is not surprising, and it's something that we're seeing across the board, is that only 27% use the same solution for IT and software development functions. I asked a similar question in a DevSecOps survey just a couple months ago, and we saw pretty much the same results. And I think that was around 25% that teams are still using disparate tools. So even though we're having these collaboration teams and we're trying to break down silos, but still today it's overwhelming that teams are using separate tools for their roles, responsibilities, and monitoring. Collaboration is getting better, but still when it comes to the core functions of those teams, they're still in separate tools. And then that's still a huge issue that we're seeing. And then we asked, what criteria is most important when selecting a new observability solution? And you can see here that provide information in real time so that the teams can act faster, be able to remediate issues before it impacts the customer. Also being able to integrate with current tools. So we see tool sprawl across the organization where teams will have 5, 10, 15, even more tools doing the same function. So really to be able to narrow that down and eliminate tool sprawl. And then obviously then ease of use being the third one. And then we ask, what is the primary reason your organization selected your current analytic and machine learning observability product that's in use? And you can see the top 2 choices that were tied were customer experience and, really not surprising, security. That should be paramount for everyone today. And then obviously then the next one would have been ease of use. So then we asked about the technology teams and how effective are they at being able to identify degraded services, because really that's what it's all about, and being able to remediate issues before it impacts the customers. You can see only 28% said that they strongly agree with this, and then 87% said that they agree. But really then that comes down to just kind of summing up really what we've talked about is in a hybrid multi-cloud environment, we're seeing that things are just getting a lot more complex, that things, especially in this environment, and not only the complexity of multi-hybrid cloud environment, but really the demands that we're seeing across the board on technology teams with digital transformation, and now with everything being at the touch of our customers' fingertips, that releases happen faster. We're seeing now, instead of months or years, releases are within days, or multiple releases in days. So really that demand on our IT teams, that they're having to find ways to really do more with less. And across really the studies, especially this one, we're seeing that process automation or workflow automation, things that can drive remediation as far as predictive analytics before it impacts the customers, are really those key that are going to help CIOs and then ultimately drive that business to stay ahead of their competitors. And then really to have tools that's in that's shared across their organization. So having a unified solution, but in this case, it's specifically in observability, but ultimately across really the technology teams and within shared roles and responsibilities. So there's a unified picture that teams are seeing the same thing, that they're able to act on the same thing and have shared responsibilities across the board. And then lastly, what we're seeing that when it comes to data analytics as a whole, predictive analytics and machine learning models are driving that drive automation is no longer a wish list. It's something that is critical across the board for all organizations to be able to survive in today's environment. So with that, again, I want to thank Elastic for their sponsorship on the study, but also for the great conversations that the team and I have had to be able to look at this topic and really understand how observability and machine learning can really make a difference within the organizations. Like I said, one of the most enjoyable discussions that I've had was really to be able to define observability and what that meant. So I wanted to say just a strong thank you to the Elastic team. And with that, I am going to hand it back to Raleigh for any questions.
Great, thank you, Will. Before I jump into the questions, I wanted the audience to know that this research report is almost ready to be released, so be on the lookout for that. You can find it at enterprisemanagement.com. I'm going to go ahead and jump into the questions. Well, the first one is, you mentioned alert fatigue as an issue. How can IT teams fix the issue with too many alerts?
Yeah, I like that question because obviously it's something I hit on in this study and just experienced it so much myself. Um, I think really our tools need to be more than just having thresholds or having uh, certain criteria that bring alerts up to the top. So this is why really in the title within this research focused on machine learning because or AI, and depending on who you talk to, on really being able to drive an intelligent way of one being able to remediate alerts without having to have our teams have that touch on them. And then also using AI and ML to really bring up the alerts that need that attention from our teams. So then that way they can just focus on those and not have to look at everything, because if they do, then they're going to get missed. But if it's really a tool that's just has thresholds and not using ML and AI, then I don't think that's really going to help that much.
Thanks for those insights, Will. The next question is, monitoring has been around for a while. Why is this so different?
That's a great question, because it has been around for a while. And even if the term observability has been around for a while. But I think the difference is what we're looking here and why we spend so much time trying to define what observability is versus just monitoring, because it really takes it to that next step. Actually, it even ties into that last question. Observability is more than just seeing the alerts, it's what is being done with alerts and how are cross teams being impacted and being able to remediate issues before it impacts the customer. So it's gone from just being able to monitor to being proactive. And I think that's really the key difference.
Thank you for clarifying that. Let's take one final question before we wrap up. It is, IT teams continue to be siloed. How can this research help break down silos within our technology teams?
Oh yeah, that's so in the research, I think the data point so that 27% of teams are still using different observability tools. And then a previous study that I looked at, I think it was like 25% of DevSecOps teams are still using separate tools. I mean, so we've talked about siloed IT teams, God, longer than I could ever remember. So and even the last webinar that I gave broke down looking at the typical 3 pillars of people, process, and technology. Because I think when we look at breaking down silos, it's really all 3 of those things around really the people and driving culture, making sure that processes are integrated across teams. And then lastly, if you can work on those 2 things, which I think are really core and extremely important. But if the teams are still in separate tools, you're still going to have the silos. So it has to be a combination of all 3 of those things in order for organizations to truly be successful at breaking down silos.
Thank you, Will, for taking those questions. And I wanted to thank our audience for taking time out of your schedule today to join us. Please be on the lookout for that email from EMA Research, and I hope we'll see you at a future EMA webinar. Thank you again for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your day.